All right, it's episode 99 of the LOTD Pod, the Left of the Dial podcast. We're all here this week.
Hey,
it's
nice.
Hail.
Yeah, it's three-man wrecking crew here, and so I'm here, Flick. We got Rudy and Richard, all present and accounted for.
So many time zones represented. Love it.
Go ahead.
I would say I think there's an all Iowa episode in there somewhere. I don't know what it is. Like, yes, there are many time zones, but all three of us are Iowa lads.
Yeah, I can feel it. I can pick a fellow Iowan out of a crowd.
That does come standard with the package. Sorry, Mr. Flick. Go ahead.
Oh no, well, I was just gonna say it's episode 99, so we're going to since we're three of us here and three is a crowd, we're gonna party like it's episode 99.
Yeah, man. Stay hydrated.
To paraphrase.
Open change.
And no real format this week. We're just going to freewheel it.
Freewheeling. You know what freewheeling really makes me think of? Rudy.
Bleecker Street in the winter, a VW bus.
Like not wearing a heavy enough jacket because you're
tough guy
20s,
from the Iron. Yeah, but he's from the Iron Range, though. You know.
Oh, he's like, don't worry about me. I'm from the Iron Range. That's a Game of Thrones thing. Yeah.
Robert Zimmerman of Hibbing, Minnesota, walking down the street there without a real jacket or hat on.
Yeah.
What would Hibbing say?
Bob
Dylan, to answer your question, Richard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, so that is probably the most recent development that I think we all kind of share an interest in. That the new bootleg series has been dropped with the 1980s stuff, which not too long ago we did a kind of a comprehensive look at.
Yeah, Bob Dylan in the 80s. It was a real revelation, and that's not necessarily a biblical reference.
You know, he was apocalyptic before the Christian stuff. You know, and he was apocalyptic sort of post-Christian too, if you want to call what he's doing now that. Like, there was always some of that. It doesn't necessarily come just with the late 70s fire and brimstone stuff.
No, I think that if you're a folk musician and you're trying to write like topical pop tunes during the Cuban Missile Crisis, like, that's very real that these things can come down. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just New Testament in the 80s versus Old Testament beforehand. You know, God telling Abraham to kill me his son.
I mean, all along the Watchtower, Highway 61, Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. These are all, I mean, absolutely apocalyptic.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there was a difference, I think, in a religious difference in the 80s stuff for sure. and you know, on that note, like I think the thing about the 80s Dylan stuff is that, you know, I think there was a huge critical backlash from the, you know, because of the religious subject matter. And, you know, like that is basically why kind of for you know, most of the generations after, people kind of thought of the Dylan stuff from the 80s as sort of this no man's land. You know, myself included, like I didn't really explore that stuff too deeply. You know, like I had Shot of Love because, you know, like you know, when I was just starting to get into Dylan, I went to Cheapo Records and found a copy of Shot of Love for like, $1.90 or whatever it was. And so, that was it. That was kind of all I knew, of the 80s stuff. Well, until until, like I also um was at a party one time and saw saw Under the Red Sky at friend of mine who was having the party, like his parents' copy of Under the Red Sky. I asked him if I could borrow that, and so that was that was the biggest for me personally. That was kind of what kept me from digging too deep into the 80s. I think was just that
Yeah.
my second taste of Dylan in the 80s was Under the Red Sky.
Yeah, that's an
So
old party trick,
no,
is that if you want everyone to leave, you put on 80s Dylan. So
well, no,
Oh
like Empire
no.
Burlesque, right?
I mean it wasn't played at the party. I just asked him if I could borrow it, because that was one of the Dylan albums I hadn't heard yet.
Yeah.
So I borrowed it and was like, yeah, this isn't very good.
Well, I think
Under the Red Sky, if yeah.
well, I think the big takeaway for me from that show, however long ago that was, a couple months ago, was how much of a fun album "Oh Mercy" is. That is another album that he made with, I think, Daniel Lanois. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's like this, the other stuff you can.
Was it the first one? I think.
Oh Mercy, yeah. In terms of their collaboration, yeah, it's their first collaboration as far as I know. And yeah, that was fun. Even I always like check that one out on eBay, because someone who's just unloading stuff, maybe they'll not realize that it's kind of a gem. But yeah, out of all the 80s stuff, you can find a good song here and there, but this one I think is the only one that really hangs together.
It is the best of the 80s albums for sure, and it is actually a good album. I don't want to necessarily go too quick into the current bootleg series that came out, but I've always thought Infidels could have been at least that good and maybe better. And I actually think, just from the little bit I've heard of the non-album stuff and then this new box set, I think Shot of Love also could have been like a second tier, Dylan record. Maybe not elite, but there was enough there for it to be solid or good, at least good, at least like Planet Waves good. Could have.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that album. When I had it back then, I thought, well, this isn't as good as the stuff that I've heard that preceded it, but it's not bad. It's just lesser Dylan. By the way, I should specify that Under the Red Sky is a 1990s album because it came out in 1990. But just because it's still in that same era of Dylan, that was basically I knew Shot of Love and I knew Under the Red Sky, and so I figured what's in between those two things. Maybe I don't need to explore too much.
You weren't wrong, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
I would say Empire Burlesque doesn't have many defenders. I actually think it's probably easier to find a defender of self-portrait. I think there are more people who genuinely like Wiggle Wiggle than like that album.
Yeah, I think that some of the things you can take away that are positive about Empire Burlesque is that Bob Dylan was doing a lot of really interesting stuff with like sparkly jackets and wearing like cut off like bicycle gloves or something. It's kind of some interesting fashion stuff, and I think you get a little taste of that with the new bootleg series, which is called Springtime in New York, the bootleg series volume 16, 1980 to 85. You kind of get a little taste of that with the kind of like unbuttoned white shirt under a cool blazer. He had his own style for sure, always has, and in the 80s it was pretty interesting.
his fashion choices, his sartorial choices, the facial hair, the hair, they were not good. They might be more offensive than some of the music. I love Bob Dylan, and I'm not just being glib. Like, I don't know, you got to hope somebody around him cares enough to be like, Bob, I need to talk to you about this jacket you're wearing. You're about to wear. There clearly is no one.
I think they had that talk in the 90s.
Well, you got to believe that, anybody that would tell him that is probably a bit intimidated to do so.
Like, who would tell Bob? Like, who is on that level? I think maybe Donovan. And I think Donovan would do it in like a really friendly way.
Sure.
But Donovan's got his own jam, so.
I read a story somewhere. I don't know if this is true, but when Bob Dylan was in the hospital with the heart condition before Time Out of Mind, of all the people he worked with, he only received a get well card from like one session musician.
Ouch.
All those years and all those people he worked with. And, I don't think that means he's a bad guy. I just think he doesn't let anybody near him. I just don't think he lets anybody near him. Would you? I mean, just put yourself in his shoes. Would you? What do you gain? Like, what's the upside for him?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've said, most of my life, and I don't know if this has ever really been something I've said on the show, but of all of the people that I idolize, or for lack of a better word, idolize, the one I definitely would never want to meet is Bob Dylan. Just would never ever want to meet him, and.
That's pretty good. Keep going.
I mean, that's the first time I've told you that. And no, I mean, I feel like I've said that a million times, because it's just, like anytime I've thought about that, it's just like there's like such a small chance that would go okay.
Yeah.
Let alone well, but just going okay. Like it would be horrible. And it just, I would almost dread it.
There's reason to believe that an interaction with him socially as possible. I do possible, but I'm a bit of a fanboy. I give him maximum room here, because just only imagine the stuff to sit through in his point the walls up. It's like Kurt said, one must put to keep oneself intact. You've got to forgive Bob on this one. You don't?
Well, so as an artist, I'll give him that leeway. I'm just saying I wouldn't want to meet him. It just, what good could come of that? Well, like I just give it a very small chance that it could be a positive experience.
Well, I think I think you could do it. I think you could do it, Sean. But the trick with talking to people like Bob Dylan is that they don't need to hear like what your favorite record is that they recorded. I think.
Oh yeah.
If you bumped into Bob,
that's a given.
So here's my advice, okay? If you run into Bob Dylan, like talk about Harley Davidson motorcycles or something, that's really, like, people who are famous on that level, they don't want to talk about their own music. They want to have like a normal, if they do want to have a conversation at all, they want to talk about like the sports team they follow or something. And so yeah, that's my only advice. And
yeah, no, I feel I definitely wouldn't go down the road of talking about his music for sure, but I feel like whatever other road I decided I'd try to go down, it would be wrong as well. I guess unless do you ever see the clip from Pawn Stars where the one dude goes up and has him sign the album? It's just me. No. I guess it's just me. I spend too much time on the YouTubes, but
Bob Dylan was on Pawn Stars.
Yeah, he was on Pawn Stars, and it's just like one of those dumb, really, like I've never even really watched this show, but like basically from watching this one clip, I could see how phony and set up the whole thing was, because the premise is that somebody comes in with a copy of Self Portrait, right? And the dude, I'm gonna guess his name is Rick. I don't know. He talks the guy down on his copy of, and you know how dumb it is. It's just like the guy comes in with one record. He's just selling the one record. That's it.
Yeah.
Just has a copy of Self Portrait, and that's all he's selling. But anyway, he talks him down, and apparently the wheels were turning in his head. Well, Bob Dylan's in town. I'm going to get him to sign this record, and then it'll be worth a lot more. And then then the next cut to the stooge from Pawn Stars. I don't even have a guess as what this guy's name is, but then he's like the one that gets sent out to get the album signed by Bob Dylan, right? And the exchange is just really just set up, but also awkward nonetheless. And he asked Bob Dylan to personalize the autograph to him, put a message to so and so, and so then he takes the album back to the pawn shop and gets cussed out by Rick because he messed it up.
Have you guys ever had an artist that you greatly respect sign a copy of their lesser work?
I did have
by lesser. By lesser, you mean like self-portrait level? Is that what we're going for?
Oh my!
I guess I had this experience once where I was at I was seeing Wire at a really small club in Portland, and brought along my copy of A Bell Is a Cup.
Wait a minute, you're going to call that inferior? Because this is going to go off the rails.
Well, not inferior, but it's
All right,
not
good.
like it's not like Chairs Missing. It's not like totally punk rock, awesome classic.
But none of that mute era 80s
Think
stuff
Flag.
even tries to. Oh, stop it.
So
Come on.
so yeah, just it's kind of funny to bring up an album that an artist maybe isn't that big of a fan of. If I were fictionalizing it, it would be a copy of Ibn Taba, but yeah, Colin Newman was just like, oh, interesting choice. Here you go.
See, I'm going to be the only one who likes that stuff then, because I think those first three were good. Those the reunion records on Mute.
I think Wire has always been really interesting, but I can't find anyone that would take the 80s stuff over Pink Flag, Chairs Missing, and 154.
Ahead is as good as any of that stuff, though. It's not better, but it's as good as any of that.
Is that one of the recent ones?
It's one of the it's their big reunion record from I can't remember the name. It's not from the album Drill. Ideal Copy. It's from Ideal Copy. It's the first single from Ideal Copy. That an Ideal Copy is so underrated.
Isn't Ideal Copy that's not the live record, is it?
No, Ideal. There's a bunch of different ways that stuff was packaged up around them, and I'm probably getting it wrong. It was they were pressed on Enigma Records here in the U.S. It was the first of their it was the first of their reunion records after the original run. I think Our Swimmer was the last of the original singles. I don't know, but anyway, Ahead was the first single after like 5 years. It is the equal of anything on all of that era, the old EMI cool. Harvest record era. So I think
I will.
One of my most valuable records that I own is Object 47, which, if you go by the maximum price on Discogs, is 160.
Why is that hard to, or why is that so valuable? It wasn't particularly rare, was it?
I think it's just it's an '08 pressing of it. It's a '08 UK pressing, and I guess they just must not have made many of them.
I do. Speaking of getting their autograph, they did put out like a 7-inch single on their mail order service, like the Germ Ship era. I did get that, and it was autographed with gold
cool.
and silver Sharpies. It's pretty exciting.
Nice.
Pretty excited by that. I saw them at the Fillmore on one of those tours in like the 2000 early 2000s, and you can't say that like, wow, man, they brang it. They let it rip. They didn't let it rip, but they were great. They were absolutely. They totally delivered. They could still play.
I love that they at least when I saw them, they played like 1.5 measures of one of their old songs, but that was like the only taste you get of anything other than their new work.
Yeah,
you do not get the hits.
You don't get the hits, but I respect him so much for that.
Know that if you go there angry that they didn't pay flag, like problem. Come on. How do we end up on Wire?
Me.
That's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are we closing the book on
Wire?
On bootleg series, or
I don't know. I thought from what I've heard on the 2 CD thing, I do think you could have made a version of Infidels that was as good as Oh Mercy. I'll be surprised if you guys, with your 2 ears in particular, because you guys are Lou Reed fans, right? His cover, I think, is good. It's probably better than like great song.
Yeah, I think for me it's better. Like it's hard for me not to think of the Lou Reed version of Foot of Pride as not. To me it's the definitive version, because it was like the first time I really heard that song. For one thing, and I thought he just killed it. Like to this day, I don't really know that you could do that song any better than Lou Reed did it. But I like the song in general. I like. I mean, I think I guess what I'll call like the 2 versions of it on the bootleg series, because one song is like the same lyrics but with a different name to the song and a different feel to it, but it's still Foot of Pride. It's just a really good song anyway. But yeah, Lou Reed just crushed it. And Blind Willie can tell, like, if those 2 songs for me would have been on Infidels, that's a definite classic.
Yeah, you could say Angelina is a release worthy, album worthy, deep cut worthy song. I think there was a couple other things there. I think you could have absolutely made a all killer, no filler version of Infidels, and that is not what went to market.
Right. Yeah, but that was Dylan's call, right?
Yeah. Well, that's go
He's
back
the one
to my
that,
point.
Yeah. No one tells Bob Dylan what to do.
Right. That's how he goes out wearing those jackets with that
Dude,
hair.
When he had to get to that to get to the mariachi phase, which I think is like seeing Bob Dylan with like a little pencil mustache and the band all dressed up like mariachi players. That is probably the coolest show I've seen. I have so much respect for that. Yeah.
I have never seen that. I'm going to have to look that up.
I'd say
what year?
Like circa maybe 2006.
I always have liked. I thought Romance in Durango was credible. I mean, it's not mariachi music per se, but just in terms of a little Latin flair. I mean, I don't think of Latin flair when I think of Hibbing, Minnesota, or Bob Dylan. It's credible.
Well, he got around a bit.
That's true.
But
certainly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just kind of going back to what actually was on Infidels, like License to Kill, I absolutely love. Joker Man's great.
Yeah.
Reggae Dylan.
I. But that's, come on. Has he ever had a better rhythm section than on that album?
Who's the rhythm section?
Sly and Robbie.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sly and Robbie Taylor. Blur is the band.
Okay. That's a
It's
cool
not
band.
bad.
Yeah.
That's not a bad band. Well, look, it's the elephant in the room. We might as well just get it over with. Let's have the. I mean, Neighborhood Bully has been memory hold. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it on a couple of different levels. I don't think there's anything wrong with the song, but if Bob Dylan releases that album today, I mean, he did, I guess. He did put on another version of it, but I don't know if you can say there's certain places it's been memory hold from what I've read. There's an article, I can't remember which culture magazine, maybe Atlantic, about how Neighborhood Bully has sort of vanished from the repertoire. It's not good enough to fight for. You know what I mean? It's there. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You shouldn't have to fight over it. There shouldn't have to defend it per se. That's what he wants to say. He has standing.
It's a nice.
And
yeah, it's a nice B-side on an import single or something, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, I guess it's not top shelf Dylan material, subject matter or not. It's not worth arguing over. I'm not sure it needed to be any further explored. I think he just did it to make a point. Again, he's Bob Dylan. He does what he wants. That's all I got on that.
It is.
Well, Union Sundown. That would be the other one that we didn't discuss. I also think Union Sundown didn't need to be written or recorded.
Ouch. That's like the pull quote.
Well, there are aspects of it that are very interesting, particularly in hindsight, right? And he does come off as basically comes off as like a right-wing populist, a little bit ahead of his time, I guess. I'm not sure he remains a right-wing populist, but that's kind of what this is. I one of the cringiest records. This is sorry. I have to get this out. I got to let the hen out. I understand like the nostalgia for the 80s has gone on a really long time, and there are parts about it that I'm fine with, but like there's certain things that have been memory hold from the 80s that the 80s should not be allowed to get away with.
Totally.
Charlie Daniels Band had several of the most ridiculous, offensive records in the world. Still in Saigon, and then in America, which is another bit of just like right-wing populism, which again is fine. If you're a right-wing populist,
well,
more power to you. But
the average person knows just the one song, I would say, but Charlie Daniels.
Well, I mean, Charlie Daniels kind of had a grift. Uneasy Rider is interesting, and Devil Went Down to Georgia's fun to play when you have kids in the car, I guess, as long as they don't just like bleep out the B word. Like, come on, he was kind of a cliche of himself, and Union Sundown is the same sort of thing. It's just that just sort of that phony populism from the mid '80s with everybody completely misreading "Born in the USA." That's what, like this is the dime store Springsteen syndrome, Flick, to quote you. This is the John Cougar Mellencampization of Dylan, and it's just crap.
Yeah, that did seem to be a trend back then, but you would think that Dylan would kind of avoid trends to begin with. I don't know. Like it's hard to look back on some things and really know what fed into them. Where that came from for him specifically, who knows?
Look, I want to quote it. Democracy don't rule the world. You better get that in your head. The world is ruled by violence, but I left unsaid. It's actually woke a little bit, kind of by modern standards, but I don't know. Bob Dylan's mid '80s critique of late capitalism. I don't know. A couple. in that context, just all this fetishization of like blue collar bar bands. Like that's what drives me nuts. Is that we're like wave stuff, and I'm glad that this survived from the 80s. But you know how much like working class bar band crap we had to listen to the entire. It was like a cat. It's like the worst parts.
I think it does matter though that I assume that was not a single. I think that you know you're maybe overly scrutinizing a song that nobody's really remembering.
Well, hold on. I think I have this right, and if I don't, I'll manage, and so will everyone else. But when Mark Knopfler was producing this album, I just read this. He got pulled off to do some German tour with Dire Straits and didn't finish mixing it. And Bob Dylan went in and decided to just mix it himself. And in the process, he took out the Blind Willie McTell and Foot of Pride and replaced it with Union Sundown and Neighborhood Bully. So these two just absolute turds in the punch bowl are really just like an impulse purchase of his, and we're stuck.
I guess Union Sundown was a single. I wouldn't have thought that, but I guess it was.
Again, there's no one telling him no at this point. There's clearly no trusted consigliere anywhere that knows what they're talking about, that has his ear. I mean, how many of the 60s guys were completely lost in the mid 80s? It's kind of just his lost era.
Just about all of them.
Are there any 60s guys that weren't lost in the 80s?
I bet there are a few, but you're right. 99% of them were just completely out of ideas. They were Starship without the success.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of a blank period for Donovan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go back to the thing at the beginning, though, that I said, is that, most of us, or a lot of us, just kind of assumed that the 80s was just kind of a wasteland. But then you look, because I mean, right now we're focusing on like what are the duds on Infidels, but as there's plenty more good than bad on Infidels, I would say.
Oh, I agree, but it could have been a masterpiece. Yeah. It could have been a masterpiece.
So it wasn't like he was just totally lost. He just had these moments of poor judgment, definitely, for sure.
The thing about the old washed up stars in the 80s, you're right. There are some good albums out there. Just, I'm going to throw one in there, and I'm not trying to get away from Dylan if you want to stay there, but I think right around this same time, Pete Townshend made White City, which is fantastic. It doesn't sound like crap from the 80s either.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Springsteen already. I mean, Springsteen wasn't, I guess he wasn't 60s really, but
I mean, like the Grateful Dead,
somebody that was big in a previous decade that had a good decade.
I'd say the only person putting out really great records that was there in the 60s that I can think of is Paul Simon.
Good call. You could absolutely.
Yeah.
Those last two Grateful Dead records, I don't think any Grateful Dead albums are particularly great. They have some great songs, but their albums.
I get your point. I think there are like 4 really great, really good Grateful Dead records.
They're fun. A lot of them are
fun. I'll say, if nothing else, American Beauty is.
That is
American Beauty, Working Man's Dead, Live from the Mars Hotel, and I think you could probably find like a lot of good stuff about Anthem of the Sun or the self-titled record. So yeah, it's not a lot, But
they weren't an albums band. They really weren't. To love that band, you couldn't just say I love one album or 2 albums. Like they were warts and all in like their DNA. By that standard, those last 2 Grateful Dead albums are not bad. West LA Fadeaway's good. Touch of Grey's good. Foolish Heart's good. They were.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the beautiful things about that band is that some of their classic songs that pop up all over the place, and bootlegs were never recorded for an album. You know, so you kind of get that secret knowledge if you really jump into like a really good live recording, like any of the live Europe 72 stuff, or there's an interesting set of recordings coming out from St. Louis in 72, which is before Donna was in the band, which I'm kind of psyched about because I like Keith being in the band with Pig Pen, but I don't really need like soul singing over these perfectly fine tunes, you know?
I think another thing too, a lot of those artists from the 60s were, you know, if you look at what they did in the later part of the 80s, I mean, Lou Reed came out with New York in the late 80s, and Neil came out with Freedom in the late 80s. And, you know, I mean, regardless,
Oh, Neil.
like
Neil was rocking in the 80s. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
New
yeah, I mean, well,
Sensations
like
is
for
more
me,
than half
I
good.
like Neil in the 80s, but I know I know it's not for everybody.
Oh, it doesn't have to be like more for us,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Transformer, we've talked about Transformer a lot. And
Yeah.
that's what, like 82, and
Trans.
that's Trans. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Got too many things going
Yeah.
on. Trans is totally a great record by Neil Young, and I think out of all the Neil Young records, it's one that I put on maybe more than any of the other ones right now, you know, in the past maybe 5 years. And yeah, I mean, there's some weird things in there, but Landing on Water is cool. And what's that country record? Comes a Time, maybe?
Comes a Time,
Old Ways.
Old
Old
Ways,
Ways.
yeah.
Yeah, Comes a Time was 1978.
Yeah, there you go.
Old Ways was Old Ways was the Geffen era album.
You know what it is? The common denominator. The only thing I don't know. I'm very conflicted here. Very conflicted because Dylan wasn't out of ideas, but the expression of the ideas was just subpar. Whereas like Neil Young was not out of ideas at all. He was just bursting with them.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
and I like that Dylan is taking some ideas from reggae, but Neil Young is taking really interesting ideas from people like Devo, you know, really getting into MIDI and keyboard sequencing and stuff. And yeah.
Well, really more from Kraftwerk or Kraftwerk. Really more from them than Devo. I mean, Devo was he was friends with Devo because I think they were opening for him.
Yeah. So, and I see all those people as like being on the same plane at that time. And yeah, Devo's an interesting band, which, you know, if you do deep research about the history of Devo, came together as like a 60s band at Kent State. So yeah, the proximity of the late 60s to the 1980s, if you weren't there, or if you don't really have that perspective in your life of like, you know, seeing things come and go, it seems like it's really separated, but it's not, you know. It's like 13 years, you know.
Of all the albums Brian Eno produced, where do you rank the Devo record?
Well, I kind of don't rank that with Brian Eno produced records because according to him, he wasn't allowed to really like do anything during like they wanted his name on the record. They wanted his assistance with like the, you know, getting everything on the tape in the correct way. But Roger Casale especially was just like, don't add anything that we're not adding. I want it to sound exactly like the demo tapes. So yeah, I mean, it's cool that Brian Eno and David Bowie were, you know, like really generous with their time and wanted to produce the band and gave them a lot of heat from that. But in terms of adding anything to it, like it's in no way like Brian Eno's relationship with the Talking Heads.
Yeah, I do. We have to go back.
He was a marketing tool in that situation.
Yeah, he's the guy who's been in, you know, in the studio a bunch. And so it wasn't that he wasn't useful, or necessary for those records to happen, but he wasn't there to do what he does. You know, he was there to like be the adult in the room who had been in a pro studio before, put out records before, but he wasn't there to like add his magic touch like he is with U2 records or with Talking Heads or with Coldplay.
Well, I'm not to go back to Dylan and not to go back to that bootleg series, but I mean, Dylan did try to get Arthur Baker in to do something, and it's not remembered that clearly by Bruce himself too. But Bruce also, I believe, brought in Arthur Baker to do remixes of some of the Born in the USA stuff, Dancing in the Dark. In particular, there is a 12-inch dance remix of Dancing in the Dark, which has, funny enough, it hasn't found its way to any of these endless Bruce Springsteen catalog repackaging. I don't know, maybe Arthur Baker was good. He did have his fingerprints on some great stuff, just none of it out of the dance genre, apparently. Is there what besides Tight Connection on Empire Burlesque can you hear his
listenable?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Oh.
the album is, some of the songs are, I guess, tolerable, but like, what did he actually do for Dylan other than put his name on it? You know what I mean? It's not that much different than Eno.
Well,
Certainly didn't save the record.
I mean, Empire Burlesque definitely sounds like an overly produced record. That's for sure. Overly produced and overly mixed. I don't know that. It does seem to me like when I see Dylan listed as the producer on that album, I'm like, really? Because yeah, it couldn't sound more like of the times than it did.
One of the last things I think that everybody knows is in the vault for Dylan that could be the basis of the bootleg series is his residency at the Supper Club in New York, which I think is late 90s, or I'm sorry, late 80s, early 90s vintage, pre-Neverending Tour, I think. And supposedly in there, and I've heard a bad bootleg of it, supposedly there's a good recording of him covering Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark. So of all the bootleg material, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back for an 80s synth nug. That is my most wanted thing remaining. What else in the catalog can you think of that's not out? For me, that's the only thing I can think of that I really want.
Was Courtney Cox there?
I don't know what, Bob. Of all the people out there, Bob does have that criticism of the him at the Supper Club. Who knows? He probably could have. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. What else is in the vaults that everybody knows about that even could be in future bootleg series? Do you guys know anything that's like glaringly missing?
Well, they've been chronological up until now, right?
No.
No, for one thing, the first thing that came out was what, a 3-disc set that was like a retrospective thing, and then it just became more specific, but yeah, not chronological.
Well, that's the other thing is Biograph came out right during this period too, which that's the other thing you have to keep in mind is Biograph came out in like what, 86, 87? All these crappy Dylan 80s records had to compete with Biograph that has like that live version of Visions of Johanna. There's not much in the world that's been recorded better than that. Up to Me from the tracks, stuff had to compete, and didn't. Here ends the lecture.
A lot of that broke up. So were you saying that you hadn't actually heard him do Dancing in the Dark, or just that you wanted?
I've heard a bootleg of it, but I've not heard a recording that indicates like there's someone who has vault tape of it. So I know it was done, but I don't know that there's a releasable recording of it. It sounded like it was recorded from a condensed mic in someone's pocket. I'm not kidding.
That would be.
I don't know if it would have been this.
Yeah, it exists.
Yeah. Yep, it's out there. it's findable. But yeah, I don't, I don't think like a high quality recording. I'm going to go ahead and bet that that's not going to see the light of day.
I don't know. You see some of the stuff on this box on the 5-disc version of the Springtime in New York. So it has this cover of Abraham, Martin, and John on it. It's rough. He covers Green Grass of Home.
Oh, on the five disc thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's making it a non-country arrangement or what he's doing with that.
I don't know. He covered Sweet Caroline too, so it's all there. I get it Friday, I think, a couple days from now. So I will have a chance to hear all. Yes, I will get to hear Bob Dylan's cover of Sweet Caroline by the end of the week. Got a lot to look forward to.
That's gonna be pretty rocking. So hope they've legalized drugs in Iowa. So
it's in the Illinois side. They're on the Illinois side. Yeah,
go get them, buddy.
Anywho, have we killed Dylan? Have we killed the Springtime in New York box?
You know, I think we have, and I don't know what all the kids are talking about in Iowa, but out here, everyone's talking about the footage that surfaced recently of Rick Astley covering this charming man with a band called the Blossoms, and how he absolutely killed it, and it has really led to a lot of optimism about Rick Astley being part of a Smiths reunion.
Are you kidding?
No,
I'm looking because feverishly. Sorry.
You really need to see
because
this.
Morrissey is unavailable, or
well, Morrissey is unavailable,
he's untouchable,
and he's just we have to kind of take Morrissey out of the equation at this point because he has become morally reprehensible. So, and it pains me to say that, but I can't ignore it. I can't ignore his political views or the crazy stuff he says, and pretend to think that that's okay when it's not okay. And Johnny Marr is putting out great records, is a totally cool guy. And I think Rick Astley is like one of the last people I would have ever thought of being like a credible stand-in for Morrissey. But then Rick Astley is playing these series of shows with the Blossoms, with music of the Smiths, and I guess it's just like revelatory. It's just awesome.
So is this his way of pitching that to the Smiths, to the other Smiths?
No, I from what I understand about Rick Astley, he doesn't have ulterior motives like that. So I think that I think it's just he's a fan and it's something that he wanted to do. Rudy, did you find the link, buddy?
I am looking. I'm amazed. Morrissey and Johnny Marr have commented on this. There is going to be a Rick Astley concert with the Blossoms. They're going to do 2 shows in London. It has the official blessing of Johnny Marr. Let's see here.
Yeah, I see Friday, 8th of October, Manchester at the Albert Hall, and Saturday, 9th of October in London at the Forum.
This is looking like yeah, I mean Morrissey's are we still recording? I saw you turn it off. Oh no. Maybe
not. No, we are recording.
Oh, sorry.
Morrissey's in the chat room right now. He's mad.
He does hold a grudge, doesn't he?
He does. He holds a grudge.
Look, I'm not going to lie. Morrissey, to quote, not to be too corny about the song, Smith song "Rubber Ring," but when I was a kid, it was great to have. I mean, I was 16 in 1986, the last year that they played America, So I was very aware of them and I enjoyed them, and they really were great at a time where being kind of the word emo didn't exist. Being kind of an emo weirdo and a place like Iowa, I was really, really glad to have that music. But Morrissey was like a sort of a sour contrarian then, and it was kind of cute when he's younger. And it just, the fact that you could live through all that he's lived through and experience all the things he's experienced, and it doesn't change him. That just seems, I just can't relate to that. I don't understand how you could live the life he's led in the world that he currently lives in and just still be stuck on that just same sort of sour stuff, that none of these things seem to have changed him. And that's gross.
Yeah, I mean I don't take any. I don't relish this by any means. Because in hindsight, or anything like that. But I think, Rudy, you can attest that I've always had my issues with Morrissey. But again, like, I don't bring this up now because now it means that it's not my way of saying, hey, I was right all along. But yeah, I think I don't know. Like, I've always had issues with Morrissey. Regardless, like, I've always been more in the Johnny Marr camp.
Yeah, I was going to say. Meanwhile, Johnny Marr in the aughts and the teens has really just come out of the shadow of being like a sideman, and is putting on all these great shows. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of seeing him play, but he's such a great performer. The Smiths tunes are, I think, like way better than the Morrissey version of the Smiths tunes. And he's also got like a bunch of really great new original music. His 2013 album, The Messenger, is just flawless. Playland has a lot of good stuff on it. So does Call the Comet. It's got a new single, which is kind of like a little bit too dancey for me, but I'm sure there's other great stuff to follow. So if you haven't checked out Johnny Marr's solo, like, go check it out.
I think the first electronic record is okay. I think his stuff with the was really good. I saw him only once, and it was with Modest Mouse, and I can't remember what tour it was. But he was great. But I mean, they didn't play any Smith stuff. I never got to see him play his own stuff. And let's be honest, Morrissey's band can't play a lick. I don't think they ever. I think they're just. I think he just enjoys their company.
No, that it's a really cool band. It really is.
No, really?
Yeah, Alan White and all those guys. Yeah, they're killers. But they've got to listen to the boss. And I've seen Morrissey play like really good shows, but I don't know, something about like the last 10 years, something's gone wrong.
I saw them at this is again. I don't know if he'd play there again today. I saw him at the Apollo Theater. Morrissey with that band. It wasn't bad, but
so
I don't know. They weren't great.
So when you say Alan White, which Alan White are you talking about?
The guy from Yes.
No. The guy in
is it
the guy in Morrissey's band, like a rockabilly guy?
They spell it differently.
Well, there are two Alan Whites that are drummers. There's the Yes drummer. And then also there was an Oasis drummer.
I guarantee you. No,
Alan White is a guitarist. Yeah.
Okay, well then there are several Alan Whites out there. I was wondering if it was perhaps a Yes drummer.
No, but from our discussions about Lou Reed, just because you were in Yes doesn't mean that you're a bad guy.
Oh no, Alan White is great. He was the drummer on Instant Karma as well, and like how awesome,
Yeah, totally, man.
He's a great drummer. Oh yeah, no, nothing. I don't have any issues with Yes, because I mean, I don't love all of their songs, but awesome musicians.
So anyway,
and
Rick Astley,
some of the
Smiths reunion, got to do it.
All right, I will look into it. And Sean, come on, really? You're going to bat for Yes?
Well, okay, so Alan White, awesome drummer. Rick Wakeman, what did he play on as well? Like, he's played on a lot of cool stuff. He was on Hunky Dory, right?
Okay, Rick Wakeman is the literal opposite of cool. But keep going.
But you like the Stranglers, and
Yeah.
Rick Wakeman was the was the big hero for I'm forgetting the Stranglers keyboardist's name. He was like the big inspiration for him.
Okay. That's I mean
And
that doesn't make Yes tolerable. The album covers alone.
And Steve Howe. Steve Howe was Bob Stinson's hero as well. So I mean, like even just given what those guys influenced, you have to give the props.
Then technically you'd have to give props to GTR for When the Heart Rules the Mind on the same basis, or I don't know, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, right? Don't they all have the same band members at some point? Come on. Well, 90125 is interesting.
We know. Yeah, Yes isn't one of my favorite bands by any stretch, but I certainly give the props.
I don't know. How much do you really listen to?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There isn't a lot that I spend a lot of time listening to, but like just the other stuff that they played on, like those guys were on the first Lou Reed album as well as, I believe, definitely Hunky Dory as well. And am I right about that, Richard? That they were on Hunky Dory? I'm gonna look it up.
I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, if you like them, that's cool. I don't really have an opinion either way, but yeah. I don't know. I never find myself like lounging around the house, playing ping pong with my wife, or like reading a book and being like, I really need to listen to a Yes record right now. Just never ever crossed by mind.
This isn't the case I'm trying to build here, but yeah, Rick Wakeman was on Hunky Dory.
I mean, so you mentioned a wife.
I guess Richard? It was just him.
Yeah.
By mentioning your wife, like, do you think there's ever been a female at a Yes concert?
I have no idea. Yeah. It seems like it would be maybe not the demographic
right
that you would go to if you were like hoping to meet somebody.
That's what Yes has incel energy. I think it's time for us to say that. And going back to the conversation we were having earlier, they're actually one of the few bands that did do well in the 80s by going at like the heart of that sort of overdone, cliched keyboard sound. They went right for it. And they are probably one of the very few who went in and were able to make a really artistically credible record out of that sort of technology of the time, of period contemporary technology. I think that's because they got the dude from the Buggles to make it. Because I think he also did Art of Noise, right? Like they had some artistic cred there in the mid 80s, but all that other stuff, it really does have that just sort of, it's just the 70s Beavis and Butthead, right? I just can't, it's the album covers. Only the 70s would you like want people to think you're cool by leaving your Yes album covers out. You just never, no time since. There's just something going on there. Can't quite put my finger on it, but
I think they got the same guy from early Genesis records to do their logo.
Yeah, Pink Floyd records too. Those record covers are all pretentious and terrible. I think that's another one of those 80s band, like our band in the 80s that really just ran out of ideas. Final Cut has a couple interesting things on them, but I'm not even sure they're from that era. And did any of the late Pink Floyd albums do anything for any of y'all? It's another band that completely ran out of ideas.
Well, these aren't albums I'm even familiar with, really.
Division Bell, I think, has some interesting stuff on it. There is something kind of interesting I remember from the Endless River. Like one track on it is kind of, I remember it. I like that album because it's almost all instrumental.
It is interesting. I will. That is an interesting record. I would rather listen to that than listen to Division Bell, though.
Okay.
Yeah,
And another thing that Ellen White was on was All Things Must Pass. So
was
there
Phil
you
Collins.
go. I mean, it's what's that?
So was Phil Collins. That doesn't mean I have to listen to Two Hearts.
No, Phil Collins was not. Are you thinking of Gary Wright?
I'm not.
You're replacing. Oh, okay.
I'm
Phil
not. I'm
Collins was
thinking
not
of
on it.
the Phil Collins and the All Things Must Pass. If only there was a device.
Was he going by a different name at the time?
In fact, there's a story that his drumming was so bad it got wiped, and later on, George Harrison brought him a cassette and asked him, was this used? Because it was so bad. But I believe on one of these reissues, it has finally come out. So technically, there is a pressing of All Things Must Pass of which Phil Collins drumming is present. If I'm right about the replay, it definitely happened.
All right. Well, that will require. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So let's wrap that one up, and then come back for episode 100, the big 100.
It's like the 1812 overture, but it's 100. I'm excited.
That's right.
Okay, guys, it's been great. Both of you, and yeah,
See you there.